Hey everybody, Mark Herman, aka LA Bengals fan on the most of the major platforms. See, we've taken a couple weeks off, and I can't even do the intro without screwing up. And I'm joined here, as always, with Jake Sirkus of the Jake Sirkus podcast, and this is the combine slash slight free agency preview of Jungle Talk. Yeah, all right. So give that clap for the people just listening on the pod. So we're going to go through. We'll pick up where we left off on our season recap and go through some news and some comments, and then we'll talk a little bit about our pending free agents and obviously some combine news. So the last time, ironically, when we record, well, first, before I forget, Jake, tell them where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jake Sirkus. That's Sirkus for that funky last name. Most of my Bengals stuff will be there. Combine, we'll be talking about all the guys that the Bengals have been targeting thus far, visiting with, because I think they get 15
minutes.
I think each team gets like 15 minutes with the guys. So brief meetings. I remember, because last year the only guy they met with that they actually drafted was Cam Taylor-Britt. They didn't even meet with Dax Hill at the combine. They didn't meet with Zach Carter or any of the day 3 guys they took. So that's a little interesting. I know 2020 they took a bunch of Senior Bowl guys because they didn't do like a ton of prep. But yeah, follow me on Twitter. And yeah, combine's always fun. I will do a little PSA to not fall in love with any individual test score. More so use there's a metric called RAS that a guy on Twitter has that's like a relative athletic score that takes everything into account, including your build, your size, your weight, your arm length, and normalize it to they do all that stuff and gives you a raw data test score instead of just saying, oh, this guy did 31 reps on the bench press, he's really, really strong, instead of, okay, he's just a really good athlete because he has a good RAS, a good overall score. So be careful when you look at individual tests. They don't really mean a whole lot in a vacuum, and sometimes it leads to people overvaluing or undervaluing prospects for sure.
Yeah, I was going to use Golston as an example of a guy who performed really well on a couple tests, looked great at the combine, became a first rounder for the Jets, and obviously he didn't pan out. I mean, that was kind of his peak, was at the combine. I don't like to put too much emphasis on one. Obviously, guys that don't have good appearances at all can still turn out to be great NFL guys. So you want to take everything with a grain of salt. Just to throw it in there for timing, you talked about the 15 minutes they have. There was a great interview with Dick Vermeil when he was on NFL Network, and he talked about how he spends the 15 minutes. And he used to say, listen, you got a short amount of time. So what you would do, he would just ask the player, tell me what your favorite play is to be part of. And then he would say, now tell me what the best defense is or offense is against that play. And he said, within that 15 minutes, just based on those two responses, you got a really good indication about the guy's football IQ. And that's what they were trying to come out of there with. You only have 15 minutes, make the most of it. So I always thought that was pretty interesting. Like I said, the last time we recorded, we closed with the Mixon news hit right after we recorded. And what's interesting is I'm hoping maybe today we have some big news break because we're recording. Maybe that's a sign, but obviously the Mixon thing turned out to be nothing. Other NFL news, there's some rule changes on the table, but from what I'm seeing, like on roughing the passer and whether PI is going to be reviewable, I don't think we're going to have any meaningful change. The NFL always kind of backs into oh, everything's fine, like they try to downplay, the officiating at the end of the season. So I don't know we're going to have any meaningful changes. Do you have any comment on that, or?
I don't think we're getting any new rule changes, to be honest. I don't really think we need them. At least there's some other stuff that they can look at. They're going to probably edit the QB sneak. I'm not going to make it illegal, but it should be illegal to touch the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage. It should have always been that way. I don't know why it's not. But I assume that they'll falter and toy with that a little bit to make it and so you can't just push the quarterback forward. It should be totally illegal.
One of the things I like, I don't know if anybody's watching any of the XFL, but there's a few things the NFL can learn a lot from some of the things that the XFL is doing. The first thing, and I've said this last year too, is the transparency on the replay. Sitting there behind the referee, looking at the different angles, listening to the dialogue back and forth between the officials. There's complete transparency on the replay, and I really wish the NFL would do something more like that. That kind of frustrating. And the 3-point conversion kind of changes things. Now, if you're down 18, it's a 2-score game. So there's some things they can look at the XFL and maybe, learn, so that's.
I think there were time. Well, first of all, the NFL is way too stubborn to do any of this. They won't.
Yes.
When you're worth $20 billion, you don't need to,
you got low again. Turn it up.
Yeah, you when you're worth $20+ billion, you can get stubborn and do this. But I think the one thing that they have talked about in the past is the 4th and 15 as an onside kick on the other 25. That makes sense. That doesn't change the game a whole lot, and it increases drama late in games without negatively affecting play. Because onside kicks normally are just really random, and sometimes 4th and 15 are as well. And it's not like you're getting free points just by converting a 4th and 15 because you still have 50, 60 yards to go if you convert it. So if you onside kick with 12 seconds, you still have a shit ton of ways to go. So it doesn't really change a whole lot, but it does open the door for some more late game drama, which is awesome for us gamblers, awesome for us fans and just the sport in general. So I could see them looking at that, but they will never add a 3-point play. They're way too stubborn. They won't change the game that much. But taking away onside kick, I think the more special teams plays you take away, the better the game actually is going to be. Because we get to see these quarterbacks more and all that stuff. You never know. I doubt it anytime soon, but the XFL is, I don't know, no one really goes to the game, so I can't really say it's a success so far. So I don't really know.
Well, think of it as a focus group on trying out new things. I mean, they're doing new things. So you could see how it actually works in application. I know it's not an NFL game, but it's still live football. And like I said, it's funny because I had transparency on replay, 3-point conversion, and I didn't. My next thing was kickoff variations, and you hit on that immediately.
Well,
so
that's what they did in baseball. They used, they started with the extra inning rules, which they started in the minor leagues a couple of years ago. I was thinking even before COVID, and then they added the pitch clock to the minor leagues. They screwed with it in the Arizona Fall League, and everybody liked it. And the games were shorter, and they had a serious problem in the major leagues the last 2 years with the length of the games approaching north of 3 hours per game. And now in spring training, They've added these new rules. They've banned the shift. They've added a pitch clock. You can't disengage the rubber twice in an at bat, and these games are going to fly by through. And honestly, that's the way it should be. I think they should take it away for playoffs, because I think the longer the game goes on, it increases more drama and the flair for the dramatic with all these pauses. And I don't really like fucking with playoff baseball, but the overall product I think is going to be a lot better this year. And they started in the minors. So you never know.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with you on both counts, because with 162 games, you need to speed those up. And then in the postseason, hey, the networks aren't going to fight you. There's nothing wrong with increasing the length of a game for playoff baseball when you're talking about the playoff ad revenue for the TV network. So that's a win-win. But let's see if the NFL tends to be one of those organizations that fights everything. And if something makes so much sense, they won't do it. So I always say, that makes so much sense, it'll never happen. And so I call me a cynic, but that's where I'm at. I would like to start out by telling everybody we already won the postseason, guys. We already won this preseason because we kept all our coaches. Anarumo stayed, Callahan stayed, pitcher stayed. I can't tell you how important. You can go back years where I've talked about consistency in the program, not having to learn new schemes, new language, all that. Keeping your coaches intact for another year means we don't take any step back. This was huge. When Anarumo did not get hired by Arizona, I was ecstatic. And like I said, I feel like we already won the offseason here.
And to expand on that even more, look at the other top teams in the league. The Chiefs lost Eric Bieniemy. They had to promote Matt Nagy, who, by the way, 6 years ago was one of the best assistant coaches in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to be that anymore, but they it's too late to really go outside the organization to hire somebody, so they just promoted Matt Nagy. The Bills, Leslie Frazier stepping away, so they lost their defensive coordinator. And the Eagles lost both their coordinators. So the fact that the Bengals kept everybody and every team and both teams that finished further than them lost people. Eagles lost both their coordinators, which is just huge. I know they
Right.
promoted Brian Johnson, their quarterbacks coach, who will be as good as Steve Steichen, but losing Jonathan Gannon's a huge deal. And then the Bills, out of nowhere, Leslie Frazier is taking a year off, and he'll come back to them in 2024. So that's a huge deal. Those are all amazing units. The Chiefs offense, the Eagles offense and defense, the Bills defense, great units that have been amazing the last couple of years, that the people running them are no longer there. And here are the Bengals, who have had now are going to have 5 straight years in the same scheme, same system. And that's just very rare in this league. It rarely happens. And, normally it turns into a lot of success, which it has so far. And they're looking for the big one for sure.
Yeah, no, this is a great year. Like I said, I already feel like we won the offseason just by that. And I know that we have home runs to make in the draft and in free agency. So just really excited about that.
And what one last thing, sorry, because Lou, Brian, and pitcher always, or not always, they were all getting poached. They were all getting looked at. It wasn't just one. It was all 3 of them. I know the Bucks were interested in pitcher as the OC for them. They went a different direction. And then Brian Callahan was getting looks for the Cardinals. Lou Anarumo was really getting looks for the Cardinals and was down to the final 2. So we could have easily lost one, maybe even 2 of those guys, and we didn't. And I don't think that says anything bad about any of the 3 of them. I think they're all super qualified. I think Lou Anarumo isn't really a traditional new head coach, because he's not a young, innovative offensive mind. So I think he has to wait a little bit longer to get his first opportunity, but he will. And then Brian Callahan's still working his way up. He has a great resume. So I don't think it says anything negative about those guys. It's just lucky for us. We get him for 1 more year.
Yeah, Lou, I was very concerned. You watch TV, you're watching the game, and there's Tony Romo saying, "See this guy? NFL teams, make note. You should be interviewing this guy." I mean, he's getting sold by the news media or watching the games, and I'm sitting there going, "Romo, shut up." I want to keep our staff intact. So, but Lou eventually,
yeah,
eventually we're going to lose some of these guys.
One time. Yeah. The one time Tony Romo would talk positively about us and not just groping over Josh Allen would be him trying to get our defensive coordinator to go to another team.
Yeah. He's like shopping our guys. I'm like, quit. You're not their publicist. Be quiet. Cover the football game. Just some real short news here. Cal Adamitis was officially re-signed, so that's no surprise there. Jonah's recovering. And we've had all these T. Higgins trade rumors. If we got a deal that wowed us, I mean, maybe, but I really think the Bengals are set on trying to keep T and Joe, extend T. So let's see. We have T for 1 more year, but, obviously it'd be better to lock him up now. We're going to have to deal with Chase next year. So let's go ahead and do that. Bates, I mean, we all know Bates is gone. We talked about this on our last show. I mean, he met with a bunch of players in Atlanta. He's already getting wooed and out there on the circuit. I don't see Bates coming back to us. And then we haven't had any news. So hopefully the Burrow contract extension the talks are happening. I mean, I know the team wants to do it. So, and the latest piece of news I just got was the NFL Players Association issued their rankings of teams, front offices, and everything. And we ranked like 27th not because of what you would think, because Zach Taylor's a very popular coach and he ranked high, but it was like, we don't have a players only bathroom for the families at the stadium. So like they have to go into the public restroom, especially for some of the nursing moms. There was certain things like that. I'll retweet the article, but it was, the Bengals do have some cleaning up to do in terms of that. If the complaint about them, also nutrition, we were one of the few teams that didn't offer dinner. And we were also one of the teams that didn't encourage supplements or vitamins. So I don't know what any of that means, but maybe there would be some change on the road. But we were among the bottom teams on the rankings. NFLPA. The report just came out this morning. So
did you see who finished 29th?
No.
The Chiefs.
Okay, so like I said, I don't know what it all means. I'm just telling everybody because literally just was reading through the article 10 minutes before we went on. I said, you know what? It's not on my list, but if I remember, I'll throw that one in there. So there you go. I will find it, retweet it, check LA Bengal fan Twitter feed. It'll be there. So that's where we're at. Before I forget, if you don't subscribe, please subscribe. It's all we ask. This is a show by fans for fans. We don't ask you to buy anything. We're not selling any merchandise on the show. So just all we ask is that you support the channel, subscribe, hit the bell button so you get the alerts on when we put up our videos. So let's jump into the free agents that everybody's kind of like talking about, which drives me nuts when we know that there's a pending free agent and we know that the team's not going to spend the money, like Jalen Ramsey. We got to add him to our team. No, we don't. We're not going to pay him that money. We have to pay. I'd much rather see the money go to T. We've got to get Burrow's contract extension done, but he's been one of the names thrown out there. Taylor Lewin, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I mean, he's a good offensive lineman, but his injury history, is that somebody you think that we'd be thinking about in free agency?
I did see that podcast clip of him potentially, or of him saying, "Yeah, the Bengals interest me." I don't really like that. I think that if they want to look at replacing Jonah, it has to come from a younger, much more athletic guy than Taylor Lewan. That's probably a wash at best in terms of him versus Jonah. And you bring him in, you piss Jonah off, and stuff. And he doesn't have any versatility. He probably can't play right tackle. So, you bringing in, you wasting cap on a high paid veteran, probably close to $10 million a year, and you don't even come close to solving that right tackle problem either. Probably not. I think that interest is going to be one-sided, just knowing the Bengals history. And also, I'm not really on that board either. So I get the interest. He's a big name. He's played in the league a while, and the Bengals really haven't had that type of lineman. I get the Kappa and Karras, but like Taylor Lewan, he was an all-pro, multiple-time Pro Bowler back when he was at the peak of his career, and now injuries derailed him. I mean, he's a good player, but he's not better than Jonah. That's a wash at best.
Yeah, I'm not his injury history bothers me in terms of what he's going to want, and I think we addressed it in the draft, but we'll cover that in our next episode when we do draft previews and stuff. And then Mike McGlinchey obviously would be the top name, but I don't know that we can somehow afford Mike McGlinchey and extend Burrow and take care of T. I mean, you got to remember, we have Von Bell. I mean, we're going to lose some people. Eli Apple probably might not be back unless it's team friendly. We got to get Von Bell back in the fold. There's other players we need to sign. So I don't know that we can afford McGlinchey, although he would be a great add to our O-line.
I think McGlinchey is not a move that they would make either. I look at it last year, and they could have had Teron Armstead for $15 million a year, who is a much better player than Mike McGlinchey. And they didn't do it, which is fine. They feel like they need to. He could have played left tackle and probably could have played right tackle too. But anyways, McGlinchey is probably a $13 million player and is nowhere near in the same tier as Teron Armstead. So what you open up is you overpay for a player who's not in that tier. And that's just not how the Bengals normally do business. They normally like to go for the more under the radar guys, the guys they can fuck with the cap a little bit better, and not give them huge signing bonus. They're not gonna, the only guy they really went after that was top of their position was DJ Reader a couple of years ago, which has paid off immensely, obviously. Right. And I doubt they go for Lewan. I doubt they go for McGlinchey, guys like that. I really believe if they're serious about fixing this offensive line. And I think they partially have. Like, we can't evaluate the offensive line at the end of the year because they were missing 3 starters who played 16 games for them, or 15, however many games it was, because they all went down week by week by week, all 3 of them.
Right.
And it really hurt them, obviously. But the offensive line was gelling during that winning streak. So I don't know if they fix it for sure, but like Chris Jones isn't the MVP of the AFC title game if Alex Kappa's playing. That's simple. I think that game is different if Alex Kappa's out there.
I totally agree.
So don't
want to lose sight of the fact that we did have that 10-game win streak, to close out the year. So,
and with the offensive line, one more thing, like we're fans are rushing to the table to fix it and just spending all this money. if we're gonna have a $50 million quarterback and two $20 million receivers, it's very possible. But you sacrifice having a very top tier expensive tackle. You're gonna if you want a top tier offensive tackle, you have to draft one. They could have
Right.
drafted Penei Sewell, they chose not to, and Jamar Chase is going to turn into a triple digit player or 9-figure player. It's just how it's going to be. Like you are not able to. These are the things that we need to start talking about now with Burrow. Is you are not able to spend premium prices, premium cap dollars on premium positions. If you want an edge rusher, you already have Hendricks under contract for 2 more years. You got to go draft another one. You want a top tier left tackle to beat the guy that you took 9th overall 4 years ago. You have to go draft his replacement. That's just, you have to keep retooling. They have the pieces that can win Super Bowls, but they need to get alternative guys. They need to get the filler guys, the depth guys, and that's just not just dishing out overpriced free agent contracts to Taylor Lewan, who's going to play 10 games next year, or Mike McGlinchey, who's nowhere near worth $13 million when Teron Armstead got $15 million a year last year.
Right. No, I
from Miami.
totally agree. The Bengals have been one of the reasons why we've won free agency is because we've been real smart with our money. I mean, if you think about it, we basically got Karros and Kappa for the price of Armstead. So, they need to spend their money wisely. Hendrickson, great value. So, that's how they need to go. You're right. Reeder was the only one where we just went out and said, this guy's the best, and it's paid off. He's a
well, I
stud.
guess that's what they thought of Hendrickson, and they were right. Like that worked.
Right.
But I don't think Hendrickson really was the top of his class because they chose between him and Lawson. They were like in on Lawson until midnight when he signed with the Jets, and then they got Hendrickson like an hour later. But like that's what they thought Hendrickson was that tier of a player, and they ended up being right. But DJ Reader was like an all-pro at that point. He was already solidified. Hendrickson had one career year as a rotational pass rusher, and they took that risk, and it worked out. So I think those two were a little bit different in terms of just resume at that point when they signed, and great thing that both those players ended up working out.
Yeah, I just see him as just the value. I was trying to point out the value. The Bengals
Sure.
are very strategic. They also will wait till later in free agency and try and get the person who's already shopped the market and maybe now is saying, all right, if we're only talking about $1 million a year difference, I would rather play here than there, and they get him at a much better value. You threw out a name. I wasn't going to go here, but since you threw him out, let's talk about it. Lawson's probably leaving the Jets. So he's out there to sign if we want to bring him back, if we want more quarterback pressure. So just a thought. Not, you don't even have to comment on it. But he's going to be available back to us if we want to add him. We'll bring that horse back in the stable, so to speak. So
I don't remember. Was he? Because I remember listening to a podcast he was on during free agency when he was negotiating. And I feel like I remember him saying good things about the organization. He was trying to re-sign. So I feel like if they wanted to go back to that, I don't think there's any bridges burned, at least not that we know of. But an edge guy that I would target for sure. This is a position that I would kind of maybe go veteran because they don't have any veteran guys. But they don't have a Carlos Dunlap the tail end of his career when he's still productive. I think Yannick Ngakoue from the Colts is certainly intriguing. He led them in sacks and quarterback hits last year. He could easily look to join a contender. I think he's a scheme fit. He still has the juice, and yeah, that'll be an interesting one to look at.
yeah.
Not gonna be crazy expensive, but I think the edge market that they're gonna need to dip their foot in that pool, at least in terms of veteran guys who are still productive, who still have some juice left. Like they're not gonna give a Chandler Jones $20 million a year. They can't do that.
Right.
But some of the more lower tier guys who could still come in as a third pass rusher and
serviceable contributors. Yeah, no, that's what those guys are the ones when they talk about depth. When you're going to that, you're not just going to something unproven. You've got somebody who's got experience. That's the depth, and we need to look at guys like that. All right, well, let's jump into the combine. Because we did promise some more combine stuff. We touched on a little bit in the beginning, but and the combine is taking on less and less significance, I think, because you've got more and more coaches that aren't going down to see players. And once again, you don't want to overvalue players, but who do you have with Bengal visits? I know you've been tracking the who's been visiting. The Bengals have been visiting with. So who do you have there?
So we've got 3 so far. I don't know if there's any more. But Florida defensive lineman Jervon Dexter, who's probably a day 2 guy. Brian Brees from Clemson, defensive lineman, and Nolan Smith, who are both middle of the first round guys at edge, or sorry, at defensive line. Those 3 players have met with the Bengals. Georgia corner Kelee Ringo has also met with the Bengals. That's kind of where I think they're going to go in the first round. I feel like they're going to go corner, and if not, I feel like they're going to go pass rusher. So look for those guys. Look out for those guys. The guy from Florida, Dexter, is a really, really long. He's only 20 years old. That is absolutely a guy they could target. They took his teammate Zach Carter last year, so they have history with taking Florida guys. Who else was a who was
Well,
not
Dunlap
was Dunlap
was the Florida.
Dunlap
was
was
the Florida
right.
guy. He was Gator. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so they have the history to taking the Florida guys. So look out for that. He's really long. He's gonna probably come in with pretty long arms, and he's really young. So they like that too. He's only 20. He's just finished his sophomore year, redshirt sophomore year. So I think he's turning 21 soon. And then Brees and Nolan Smith are 2 bigger names that are probably not going to get to the Bengals. I think if Brees is there, they'll take him. At that point, you have to. But corner is probably also a position I could easily see them taking. I don't know if they've met with Joey Porter or Clark Phillips, but those are definitely 2 guys to look out for. Joey Porter is a big, stocky corner, 6'2" from Penn State. Clark Phillips probably going to be more of a slot guy. I think I haven't really watched him, but he was very versatile at Utah, playing in the back end of the secondary. So those 2 guys I think are going to be on their radar. We haven't talked about offense. I'm on the Bijan Robinson train. I think if he's there, you run to the podium to make that pick. I think that would just take our offense to a whole different level, getting that type of playmaker. Maybe a tight end. Bengals fans love Matthew Mayer. I think he'll test really well. Darnell Washington is at the top of my list from Georgia, 6'7". I think he might be even 6'8". He'll test off the charts as well. He's going to run like a 4.5 at 6'8". It's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
and you got the kid from Utah. People like the Kincaid. So
yeah, Dalton Kincaid. So a couple of Utah guys. Look out for Clark Phillips in the secondary. Look out for Kincaid. I don't know if he's going to test as well as Mayer in Washington, so it might scare the Bengals a little bit, but we'll see. But yeah, just look out for those guys. There's 3 positions every year. I think this is my draft philosophy, and I think some teams actually do follow this. There are 3 positions every year where you have to, in either round, it doesn't matter what round, 1st, 7th, undrafted, well, first through 7th, whatever, that you have to take at least 1 guy from. That is left tackle, edge rusher, and corner. Sorry, left tackle, wide receiver, corner. Those are the 3 positions, and those are all positions that the Bengals probably need to address in the draft. I think they will, and then we'll see what they do in free agency. Well, I guess free agency is before, so we'll know.
Yeah. Well, they can.
The last couple of years, we've got an idea of the Bengals draft plans based on what they've done in free agency. Last year, they didn't get anybody in the secondary when we thought we needed one. They drafted Cam Taylor, Brett, and Dak Sella with their first 2 picks when they had previously gone offense the first 2 rounds in the Burrow era. So they took 2 defense last year.
The free agency, you can try to fill a hole, and that gets you to where you can draft more best player available if you could take care of that need. I know the year they got Cordy Glenn, they really felt like they had dealt with linemen. Clearly, it didn't work out, but it showed you, but it showed you that they were trying to deal with it in free agency prior to it. We didn't have to go out and get an early edge rusher when we signed Hendrickson. So, and you bring in a Awuzie. So, but I agree, corner and lineman, you can never put too many horses in the stable there. You just can't. And you constantly have to be, if you want to have a good secondary, you constantly have to be bringing in new talent. So I see us going that way as well. Also remember, sometimes we don't meet with the player that we specifically have on our list, because we are entering the season when we get closer to the draft of disinformation. Teams talking about how happy they are and how excited they are that this one player might be there to try and get another team to jump ahead of them so they can actually get the player they want. So just bear that in mind, because we have drafted a lot of guys that we didn't meet with in the first round, where we've kind of we haven't had them in for a visit, and we all along knew we were going to take them. So just remember that we are entering the season of misinformation. So take everything with a grain of salt. So
it's funny you mentioned the Corey Glenn trade because that shit was awful, man. That trade was so bad. They traded down and they took Billy Price. That was a brutal offseason.
I've said this before. The only reason I'm not angry about Price is because we turned it into BJ Hill. If we had not recovered BJ Hill from that deal, and I still to this day cannot understand how he didn't latch on with the Giants, because he's been such a great contributor to our team. And the Giants actually said, well, we'd rather have Price. It was like, well, here you go. And it's one of
you can have him.
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons we recouped that pick with Hill, with that trade. We saved ourselves, because otherwise I'd have Billy Price right up there with Kajana Carter and all
Cedric Abui.
Cedric Ogbuehi. Don't even get me started on that guy. Just talk about that was our biggest free agent blunder, was drafting Ogbuehi and Fisher in 1 and 2. They were trying to stockpile, and both of them were busts, and we let Witt walk because we had those two in the wings. We thought we had Witt's replacement. That biggest free agent blunder by the Bengals. So I don't want to harp on negative.
They let Zeitler walk too that same offseason. They both left.
Yeah, well, and that's why we have Burrow, because we stunk it up so bad. We had the first overall pick, and it turned everything around. I want to go back to the Taylor Lewin real quick. The comments that he made. The one thing I took away from it is, we are, and we know this, we are a desirable destination now for free agents. I mean, there are people that want to come to our team. This is not don't sign with the Bengals. Don't sign with the Bengals. There are some players that'll take a little less to come here to play in this organization, because they've seen what we've done the last 2 years. So that's the one thing I take out of it. I don't think we'll sign him, and I don't think we should, but that's what I take out of that. All right. Do you have anything else you want to add about the combine, or?
No, just harping on the fact, don't take the individual test results too much for granted. Don't fall in love with the guy just because he's running really fast, just like I did with John Ross.
Oh.
And
the
Bengals also did that.
Put that up there with the Billy Price picks. That was
me, myself, and Duke Tobin both fell in love with John Ross because he ran really fast in a straight line for 4 seconds.
So,
but yeah, John Ross is not a good football player, and unfortunately, but take the overall athletic score. I'll be retweeting them all week, so follow my Twitter for some notable guys. I'll be retweeting all the notable guys, their final test scores, their RAS, from this awesome guy on Twitter, Math Bomb, I think his name is. He does great work anyways.
Right.
Like around this time of year, he always gets a ton of followers. So not really worried about giving him a shout out, because he's going to get a crap ton of impressions this week.
So.
Enjoy. I think the combine is really fun because we get to see how just like the things that these 20-year-olds can do that no one else on the planet can do. It's going to be pretty insane. Like, we're going to see guys bench press 225 pounds for 25 times. I can barely do it for one. Like, it's fun. It's fun.
I don't even think I could pick it up. So I don't, bench isn't my thing. I curl a lot and stuff, but bench is not my strength. So, well, we will be back. Please follow Jake. I will try and retweet anything I see that he's got that I think you guys did. I'm in the middle of 3 trials at work this week. So, I do court work, so it's a busy time for me, but I will definitely try to get stuff out there. We'll be back with a free agency show next week. We'll preview more free agency next week. So we just calendared that. So please follow Jake on Twitter. He does some great podcasts. He does a gambling podcast. So definitely follow him. Like I said, please subscribe to the channel if you don't already subscribe to this channel. And tell any of your Bengal friends about us. Like I said, we're just this is by fans for fans. So we will be back next week. And with that, I'm going to say, hoo-day, everybody. Take care.